Guys, back in January, one of my first reviews was for Halloween 6. I had just gotten the box set shortly before that, and I had just started reviewing movies. And if you watch that video, you can tell I'm really nervous, and one of the biggest problems I had was I was just trying to get through the review without passing out. I didn't start reviewing the whole Halloween series for quite a few months after I reviewed Halloween 6, the producer's cut. And I always told myself, you know what? Halloween 6 is one of my favorite sequels in the whole franchise, so if I ever get a chance, I want to go back and I want to try to do a better review of it, to maybe do it justice. So without further ado, here is my re-review of Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers stars Donald Pleasance, Paul Rudd, and is directed by Joe Chappelle. So Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, picks up years after Halloween 5. And this movie had a heavy task on its hands because it had to tie up a lot of loose ends from Part 5. If you remember, Part 5 had the Man in Black, and we didn't really know anything about him, aside from him basically stalking Jamie. So Curse of Michael Myers had to push the story of Michael Myers forward while explaining the story of the Man in Black, and I thought it did it really well considering what it was up against. And in the beginning of the movie, Jamie has just had her baby and she's running from Michael, and Michael catches up to her in the barn, and in the theatrical cut he kills her. But before he's able to do that, she's able to hide her baby, and Paul Rudd, who plays Tommy Doyle from the very first Halloween, he manages to find the baby, and it is his mission throughout the movie to keep the baby safe from Michael Myers. And guys, I know a lot of people really do not like Halloween 6 because the story is kind of a mess, especially if you watch the theatrical version. The producer's cut actually rights a lot of those wrongs, but it also introduces some wrongs of its own. But to start with the good, I must say the atmosphere for Halloween 6 is the best before and since. The only movie that I thought rivaled 6 in atmosphere was the first. I love the cinematography of this movie, how it's really dark and wet. It's got a bluish tinge to it, kind of like some of the scenes in the first. And the movie really feels like Halloween. It feels like the holiday. Every scene feels like it's just bathed in atmosphere. Also, I actually found the story really interesting because they had never tried to explain so much about the myth of Michael Myers. The whole druid ritual and the constellations and Samhain. I remember they mentioned Samhain in Halloween 2 and how Dr. Loomis explained the whole druid cult, but then they never really bothered to mention it again until Halloween 6. And the reason I think it worked is because Daniel Farrens was a huge fan of the series. He knew each movie by heart. He even used some of the characters' names from previous movies, like Mrs. Blankenship was a reference to Halloween 3. And I remember he even wanted to show Halloween 3 on the TV screen that Mrs. Blankenship was watching, which would have been really cool. Also, I believe there are 2, maybe even more, types of Halloween fans. I mean, you got people that like Halloween 1, 2, and H2O, and then you got people who like the Thorn trilogy. And I am a big fan of all the movies, but I especially love that whole Thorn trilogy because they tried to introduce a story and they tried to keep it moving forward. How much farther they could have went with it after 6, it could have gotten really bad. So I think 6 was the logical stopping point for that storyline in the series. But it's still there, and I always go back to it and I enjoy it. And for that reason, I usually watch 4, 5, and 6 more than any other movie in the franchise, except for, of course, the first. I also thought Paul Rudd was really, really good in this role, and I remember reading that he didn't really talk about Halloween 6 for years and years and years, and then recently he finally came out and talked about it, and he said, you know what? I really did enjoy making that movie. I was kind of ashamed of it at first, but then looking back, it's actually a movie that I'm proud of, and it's a Halloween movie. I mean, Halloween's huge for a reason. And it's cool to see Halloween 6 starting to become a cult classic and getting the attention that it deserves in its own right. And I think part of the reason for that is the myth of the producer's cut, and how for 20 years now we never thought that the thing was going to be released. And then all of a sudden here we are, and I still can't believe it to this day. This was my holy grail, and I've actually had people comment that it's sad that this is my holy grail of Blu-rays, but you know what? Everybody's got their thing with movies, and everybody's a fanboy of something, and I'm a fanboy of Halloween. And so I make no apologies. It's a movie that's always been part of my life. And just so you guys know, I am not alone. There are many a Thorn fan out there. Also, Michael Myers in this movie. George P. Wilbur played him quite well in Part 4. And Part 4 is also one of my favorite sequels in the series. And I also thought he did a damn good job in Part 6. Does he fit the body type? Is he a little bit too big? Yes, he is. But I still think he was able to convey a true sense of evil through that mask. I mean, you never saw his eyes in that mask. They made him really, really creepy, and I think 6 might be one of the creepiest versions of Michael out there. And you know what, when I compare 6 to H2O, that Michael Myers would handily whip the shit out of the Michael Myers that's in H2O. I mean, the Michael Myers in H2O, his eyes are just, you can see his eyes in full view. It's just ridiculous. And also, Michael Myers was brutal. He backed up the way he looked. One scene in particular is the doctor's scene where they're doing some kind of experiment at the last act of the movie in the theatrical cut. And he takes that big freaking knife and goes into the room and just cleans house. I remember when I first saw that movie, I had never saw a Michael that vicious before, and I just ate it up. And also, I gotta give respect to Donald Pleasance. Donald Pleasance died right after the initial photography of this movie. When I go back and watch it, I kind of feel sadness because Donald Pleasance was just as important a character as Michael Myers throughout this whole series. And even in that last movie, he loved that character so much. He never gave it any disrespect. He always treated him like an A character, and I always loved that about Donald Pleasance. And still to this day, I miss him. I miss Donald Pleasance. I wish we still had him. Unfortunately, there will never be another Donald Pleasance. There just won't. Now, in my first review of this movie, I talked about the producer's cut, and I talked about how the way they handled Michael in that last act of the producer's cut was just completely wrong, and I stand by that. I did not like the way that Michael was controlled by the cult, and he's just kind of standing there in the ceremony. That is, to me, that's just not Michael Myers. The theatrical cut gets a lot of crap, but you know what? I really enjoyed that last act. I mean, I thought it was nail-biting, and it almost had a heartbeat to it. It was really well executed, I thought, and it flies by just like that. The ending is very ambiguous, but I actually like that about the movie. And when you hear that shriek of Donald Pleasance at the end, it kind of sends a chill down your spine. If you guys watch the documentaries on this 2-disc set, I went through them, and there's so much good stuff on this, but I remember them talking about when they filmed the theatrical ending. They did not have permission to do it from the producers. They kind of went covert ops, and I think they filmed it over the course of a weekend or something like that. And to be able to pull out what they did was pretty amazing. And I never even knew that. There's a lot in that documentary I never even knew until this just came out. Really interesting stuff, though. And I also thought it was really interesting how one of the characters, she's an interior designer, and she was designing Edgar Wright's house, who is the director of Scott Pilgrim. He recognized her, and he said, "Oh my God, you were in Halloween 6. And Edgar Wright is a huge Halloween 6 fan, and I really got a kick out of that. That was really cool. So in the end, guys, which is the better version of the movie, the theatrical or the producer's cut? Personally, I think it's a combination of the two. I own both versions, obviously, with this, so I made my own fan edit. It takes a lot of the added character building scenes from the producer's cut, and it takes out the third act of the producer's cut, which I didn't like. That's my preferred version of the movie, and that's probably the way I'll watch it from now on. But I know some people like the producer's cut ending, and they don't like the theatrical cut ending. And that's fine. But what's great is we have both those versions now out there to enjoy. But guys, I've had a lot of fun redoing a review of Halloween 6. I think I've gotten out everything I wanted to say about it. As far as a rating, just like the first video I did, I'm definitely giving it a purchase worthy. I love Halloween 6. It's such a great movie in that franchise, and I just adore it. So Comment below. Let me know what you guys think. I know there's a lot of you that do not like Halloween 6. Looking forward to discussing it with you. But subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and Humdrum out.